Greetings, adventurers. You're listening to The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood with me, Professor Atwood. I'm glad you're here, and I can't wait to tell you about my latest journey. Don't worry, it's a safe space. I'll handle all the danger for you. I designed these stories to help you relax, chill anxiety, and go to sleep. Maybe they'll even put a smile on your face, even if it's a sleepy smile. So please, settle in, relax, and prepare to quietly drift off with me to parts known, unknown, and even some places in between. Comfortable? Very well. Let's get underway. Good evening, adventurers. I hope you're doing well. I also hope you're all cozy and settled in, because tonight I'm going to tell you about one rather large complication in trying to leave Mars. Sure, I mean, that happens sometimes on adventures. Just when you think you're done, something unexpected pops up right at the end. For instance, say you're a young scientist and adventurer, and after years of searching, you finally discover that lost continent that every other scientist and explorer insisted was a myth. Now, let's say, to prove all of them wrong, you can't wait to bring back the skeleton of a monkey-porcupine hybrid and present it along with video, photos, and soil samples at the next Adventurers Club meeting. Then you could put all the evidence right in their smug faces and bask in a little satisfying comeuppance. Especially Professor Kirschenbaum, who would harumph condescendingly while twirling his handlebar mustache whenever I mentioned the lost continent of Alakanasia. It was right where I said it was, through a moving and phase-shifting electromagnetic field right in the center of the Bermuda Triangle. Let's just say after I presented my PowerPoint presentation, he wasn't harumphing after that. Now, okay, maybe that's getting a bit too personal, but Professor Kirschenbaum is really annoying. If you met him, you'd understand. But I'm getting off track. Back to the adventure itself, as I do have a point to make. I was all packed up and ready to leave Alakanasia when something unexpected happened, hindering my return. The living monkey-porcupine hybrids, which I named monkeypines, noticed I was removing a skeleton and didn't take too kindly to it. Without knowing it, I had disturbed an ancient burial ground, and things were escalating rather quickly. Now, I was young back then, and I am much more careful now about ancient burial grounds, and of course more aware, empathetic, and respectful of them now, too. And according to every single burial ground legend, leaving an ancient burial ground undisturbed is also a good way to avoid curses. I didn't want to be attacked with monkeypine quills, as I was most certainly not dressed for it, so I quickly used the UPL, the Universal Pantomime Language, and, while it did take some time, I was able to come to an agreement with the monkeypine shaman. He allowed me to take the bones with me in exchange for an apology and a crate full of snacks. So it all worked out in the end. In fact, the monkeypines ended up being migratory and ended up on another uncharted island with a dinosaur guarding a lost temple. They kept their distance from one another, but I was surprised to see them again years later, as you can imagine. The point is, the end of an adventure is not always where you think it is, and this seemed to be the case on Mars as well, and I will tell you all about what delayed our departure in a moment. First, Happy New Year, again. I do like saying it throughout January, and while I'm well within the boundaries of etiquette, I also feel there's no harm in it, so I continue to engage in the practice every year. Bradley tends to stop around January 15th, and you know what? That's fine as well. Now, I'd like to mention something about our stories, especially for the new listeners. You Professor Atwood OGs, I think that's what Bradley says, already know the score. Anyway, the stories are designed for you to drift in and out of, and while yes, I do like to tell you a full story every episode, drifting in and out, or falling completely asleep, is factored into the equation. You can pick things up anywhere, as that's why I do the story recaps at the beginning, and you can go back and listen to previous adventures anytime you wish. So by all means, enjoy the show any way you wish. It's designed that way. No rules and no pressure, adventurers. I'd also like to nudge you to rate the show with a bunch of stars. Reviews are great too, and it's always nice to read pleasant things about what we're doing over here. And this is also important as it helps grow the show. Don't forget to tell your friends directly about the show and post about it wherever you post about things. The more adventurers, the merrier. Now, before I mention the White Cat Adventurers Club, I want to remind you that we've created a Science and Adventure Helper donation on the homepage. Just go to whitecatentertainment.com and click Donate for a one-time donation. And we also accept Happy New Year donations, all the way through January, of course. But if you do want more, there's the White Cat Adventurers Club. How about ad-free listening to all the shows, some behind-the-scenes information, and an exclusive look at my very irregular journal. Science and exploring is expensive, and your support helps make it happen. And for just $5 a month, you can support this show. There are different tiers with different rewards, including an exclusive t-shirt. Just go to patreon.com/whitecatentertainment and enjoy the access your way. All right, now let's get back to the story. We had just finished up a delightful time at the Mars Retro Amusement Park with an incredible log flume ride that phased in and out of time for a one-of-a-kind experience. I had gotten an overall idea of the terraforming agreement, and all of the Martian mysteries had fallen into place nicely. I was able to save my friend Tom, the futurist, from being stuck in and out of time, and we were able to defeat a sentient meteor storm to allow my son Patrick and his crew to land safely on Mars. At least I thought the sentient meteor storm was defeated. I was wrong, but more on that in a bit. As reluctant as we all were to leave the Martian amusement park, it was closing, and it was time to return to the Martian inner city. We waved goodbye to the friendly time reps as they began to close down the park. There were even a few characters walking around who were saying goodbye to the Martian children, including a walking pocket watch called Old Timey and a white rabbit who always seemed to be late. And since Alice in Wonderland was in the public domain, and on another planet, I doubted there would be licensing issues. We once again put on our spacesuits and walked out of the comfortable climate and gravity-controlled dome. That was a feat of engineering as well. The Martian amusement park had to have its own custom gravity to emulate Earth, not Mars, or the roller coaster and other amusements would not function properly. As I'm sure you're aware, a roller coaster is a machine that uses gravity and inertia to send a train of cars along a winding track. Now, the combination of gravity and inertia, along with the g-forces and centripetal acceleration, give the body certain sensations as the coaster moves up, down, and around the track. The forces experienced by the rider are constantly changing, leading to feelings of joy in some riders and, nausea in others. In Martian gravity, this would all be moot, especially the thrills. So Earth's gravity had to be brought to Mars, in a way. Now, this was much easier to do in a pressurized dome, which, now that I thought about it, was quite multi-purpose. But getting back to the roller coaster, initially the roller coaster car is pulled to the top of the first hill and released, at which point it rolls freely along the track without any external mechanical assistance for the remainder of the ride. The purpose of the ascent of the first hill is to build up potential energy that will then be converted to kinetic energy as the ride progresses. The initial hill, or the lift hill, is the highest in the entire ride. As the train is pulled to the top, it gains potential energy. Interestingly, two trains of identical mass at different heights will have different potential energies. The train at a greater height will have more potential energy than a train at a lower height. This means that the potential energy for the roller coaster system is greatest at the highest point on the track, or the top of the lift hill. As the roller coaster train begins its descent from the lift hill, the stored potential energy converts to kinetic energy, or energy of motion. The faster the train moves, the more kinetic energy the train gains. Because the mass of a roller coaster car remains constant, if the speed is increased, the kinetic energy must also increase. This means that the kinetic energy for the roller coaster system is greatest at the bottom of the largest downhill slope on the track, typically at the bottom of the lift hill. When the train begins to climb the next hill on the track, the train's kinetic energy is converted back into potential energy, decreasing the train's velocity. This process of converting kinetic energy to potential energy and back to kinetic energy continues with each hill. The energy is never destroyed, but is lost to friction between the car and track, bringing the ride eventually to a complete stop. Of course, this is factored into the design and engineering, as the train always has enough kinetic energy to get back to the station, with some to spare, as you've probably noticed a robust braking system when you return from your ride. When going around a roller coaster's vertical loop, the inertia that produces a thrilling acceleration force also keeps passengers in their seats. As the car approaches a loop, the direction of a passenger's inertial velocity points straight ahead at the same angle as the track leading up to the loop. As the car enters the loop, the track guides the car up, moving the passenger up as well. This change in direction creates a feeling of extra gravity as the passenger is pushed down into the seat. At the top of the loop, the force of the car's acceleration pushes the passenger off the seat towards the center of the loop, while inertia pushes the passenger back into the seat. Gravity and acceleration forces push the passenger in opposite directions with nearly equal force, creating a sensation of weightlessness. At the bottom of the loop, gravity and the change in direction of the passenger's inertia from a downward vertical direction to one that is horizontal push the passenger into the seat, causing the passenger to once again feel very heavy. Most roller coasters utilize restraint systems, but the forces exerted by most inverting coasters would keep the passengers from falling out anyway, but, better to be extra safe. G-forces create the so-called butterfly sensation felt as a car goes down a gradient. An acceleration of 1 standard gravity, or 9.8 meters per second squared, is the usual force of Earth's gravitational pull exerted on a person while standing still. The measurement of a person's normal weight incorporates this gravitational acceleration. When a person feels weightless at the top of a loop or while going down a hill, they are in free fall. However, if the top of the hill is curved more narrowly than a parabola, riders will experience negative Gs and be lifted out of their seats, experiencing the so-called butterfly sensation. Now, I'll admit, while I loved coasters in my youth, I'm a bit more particular about them now and tend to avoid the ones with the word extreme in the title. Anyway, we walked back across the Martian landscape and took turns entering the hidden surface access hatch that led to the Martian underground. As we walked through the underground back to the Martian inner city, we saw that the holiday lights were being taken down, which always makes me a bit melancholy, but also makes me look forward to the next holiday season. And if I ever want some extended holiday festivities, I usually go with Bradley to his home in Christmastown, where the Christmas season lasts considerably longer, as you can imagine. Once we had returned to the Martian inner city and once again removed our spacesuits, Jillian served a light lunch, as she knew we all had to begin preparations for departure right away. Everyone was eager to get back to their home planet, and Tom, the futurist, was eager to not only get back to Earth, but also his own time. there was much to be done before we left. Flight Commander Barry and Flight Engineer Kara began prepping the journeyman for launch. The two linguists, Stephen, not Steve, and Darrell with a Y, were busy finishing up the terraforming agreement and converting it into both languages for final approval for King Targon and the Martian Parliament. It also had to get final approval from Janet, the NASA mission specialist, who was also involved in the last-minute contract details. Aaron, our medic, was prepping sickbay for the journey back home, but interestingly, he seemed concerned about something. And at the time, I should have pressed him on it a bit. His military training was kicking in, and something was bothering him, but he kept it to himself. He asked if he could assist Flight Commander Barry inspect the weapon systems, which was an odd request from the medic, but I approved and was sure Barry would appreciate the extra pair of hands for takeoff prep. Dolores and Bradley were headed back to the journeyman as well for final preparations. Jillian, however, was doing last-minute kitchen duty and exchanging recipes by request of the royal family, and that wasn't something I was about to cut short, so however long that took, so be it. My son Patrick and I made inspections of both vessels together, and both the John Carter and the Journeyman looked to be in great shape. The damage from the Meteor Storm was minor on both vessels, and Kara had already repaired it. Doing the inspections also gave Patrick and I some extra time to spend together. I once again told him how proud I was of him, and he told me what an inspiration I was to him, which was incredibly flattering. If I wasn't already on Mars, his comment would have sent me to the moon. A little play on words there, I hope you don't mind. But it was also great to work together too on the same mission. We both agreed it should happen more often, and he also said again that he would visit more when he was on Earth, and I said I would love that, of course. I soon received word that the terraforming agreement was now signed, sealed, and delivered, and that our mission here on Mars was officially complete. We all cheered and shared a celebratory drink with our new Martian terraforming partners in the drawing room just off of the dining hall. King Targon also thanked me personally and told me to take any book of my choosing from his library. As you remember, the Martian library is very special, with any book instantly translating itself to the language of the reader. I said I was honored and couldn't really decide, but then I saw a Martian favorite, and also one of my favorites of all the Martian legends, the story of Ramu-Mu-Ra. As you may remember when I talked about it earlier, Ramu-Mu-Ra was a Martian warrior who fell into a hole in the Martian desert and defeated 17 rowdy and mischievous birds and dinosaurs from Earth. Like I said, how they got to Mars was never really explained, but it was a legend, and, with legends, you just kind of go with it. As Martians were fascinated with all things Earth, from pop culture, stories, nature, amusement parks, and dinosaurs, our planet tended to have a certain awe for Martian storytellers in particular, filling them with mystery but not necessarily logical story progression, and that was fine. Anyway, Ramu-Mu-Ra defeated all the errant birds and dinosaurs with science, and so defeated they agreed to become farmers and builders and help build the Martian underground, and then make it self-sustaining. Now, I'll mention again there was a rumored first edition where Ramu-Mu-Ra and the Martians decided to eat the birds and dinosaurs instead of coming to an agreement with them, but it was later revised after complaints from a fair amount of Martian schoolchildren who were expecting a much more hopeful ending. I did not see that edition in the library, which didn't surprise me at all. I thanked King Targon again and packed up the book with my belongings. Jillian was working on a farewell meal for all of us with the Martian chefs when a purple alert sounded. Yes, it was really a red alert, but due to the Martian sensitivity to the usage of the color red, we had to refer to it as purple, but it was just as serious. Flight Commander Barry and our medic Aaron called, a bit frantic, saying that neither ship could leave the planet right now. I of course asked why, and the response was that the Sentient Meteor Storm, or by then Meteor Swarm, which we thought we had scared off, had returned. and this time it looked angry, well, as angry as a sentient meteor swarm can look, and wouldn't allow either ship to blast off. This is clearly what Aaron had been worried about. The swarm had positioned itself over both ships and wasn't budging, blocking both spacecraft's takeoff trajectories. It would be impossible to leave until the meteor swarm was cleared. The problem was, I needed to take off in the Journeyman to clear the swarm, which is something I couldn't do, and the meteor swarm seemed to know that. I asked King Targon if there were any other planetary defenses, and he said, hesitantly, that, well, the Sentient Meteor Swarm kind of was the planetary defenses until it went rogue, so no. I called a meeting with my son, Patrick, Flight Commander Barry, and Aaron, our medic, who of course had an Air Force background and an eye patch, and something told me he may have some useful insight here. Since he was the one who was afraid this may happen, he may have some ideas on how to deal with it. The meteor swarm was hovering over both of our ships, preventing takeoff. I thought about it and discussed it with both crews. After some deliberation, we decided that the best course of action would be a type of feint attack with one of the ships, while the other got into position in order to launch. Now, in case you were wondering, a feint attack is designed to draw defensive action toward the point under assault. It is usually used as a diversion to force the enemy to concentrate more manpower in a given area, to weaken the opposing force in another area. Unlike a related diversionary maneuver, a feint involves actual contact with the enemy. If we could trick the Sentient Meteor Swarm into going after the John Carter again, I could launch the Journeyman and disrupt the storm with our weapons array before the storm could do any significant damage to the John Carter. And you're probably thinking, since Tom, the time-traveling futurist, was there and owed me a favor for getting him unstuck from being stuck in and out of time, why didn't he use his superior time-traveling technology and take care of this for us? Well, and I don't blame him for this, there were certain protocols and rules he had to follow, and he wasn't allowed to directly help us for fear of altering the timeline and triggering a butterfly effect or a grandfather paradox. But, I think that was just kind of the cover story. He gave me the impression that there was very little chance of that happening. But with all the bureaucratic time-traveling red tape and future rules, it was just more prudent to let us handle things on our own. So we fired up the engines of both ships, which instantly angered the meteor swarm. The individual meteors seemed to move into position even more to block the trajectories of both spaceships. I coordinated with Patrick, and we fired the thrusters for both ships, and soon we were both hovering off the surface of Mars, getting ready for the feint attack. The John Carter fired its rockets and started to move into position away from the planet to lure the swarm away from the Journeyman so Barry could maneuver the ship into a firing position. And then something unexpected happened. It didn't work. The Sentient Meteor Swarm had become more sentient. It had anticipated our move and had spread itself out equally to block both our trajectories. But there was one thing I did notice. The swarm had to remain together and intact. It didn't split up. Perhaps I could use that to our advantage. But how? I ordered everyone back down to the surface and we regrouped in the Martian inner city. Ironically, it may end up being more difficult to leave Mars than it was to get here. Between both crews, the Martian Parliament, the Martian scientists, and the royal family, there was no shortage of ideas, some good and some a bit questionable. Everything from building an anti-meteor surface-to-air missile battery on the far side of the planet to just settling down on Mars and being offered a few plots of underground land at a significant courtesy discount were being presented. But I knew there had to be another way. I just had to find it. And that's when I got a visit from Aaron, our medic with an eye patch and a very colorful past. He said when he was on a secret mission in the Arctic, he had to outmaneuver both Russian spies and true Emperor penguins, who had somehow formed a temporary alliance to retrieve a nuclear core from a lost submarine. He said he succeeded in his mission by using trickery and subterfuge, since he was woefully outnumbered by both humans and large, arrogant penguins. Bradley was very interested to hear this, as it happened near Christmastown, but the U.S. military had kept it quiet, as did the Russian military, and as did the true Emperor penguins. But the truth be told, the true Emperor penguins probably just forgot about it. And then it hit me. That was the solution. But I would need Tom's help, but the non-time traveling kind, so I was hoping he would be amenable to assisting us. Turns out he was, as what I was asking for didn't break any of the time rules he had to follow. Basically, I would need Tom to access and retract the dome over the Martian amusement park. I knew this was possible, as it was a safety feature for time travel and repair, like in the Time City Resort in the Paleozoic era. It's truly remarkable how domed cities, and in this case amusement parks, worked. You see, a domed city is a structure that encloses a large urban area under a single roof, or like I said, an amusement park. In most cases, the dome is airtight and pressurized, creating a habitat that can be controlled for air temperature, composition, and quality, typically due to an external atmosphere, or lack thereof, that is hostile to habitation for one or more reasons. Add gravity to that list and you have city domes compatible with other planets as well. Dome cities have been a fixture of science fiction and futurology since the early 20th century, offering inspiration for potential utopias and may be situated on Earth, a moon, or another planet. In the early 19th century, the social reformer Charles Fourier proposed that an ideal city must be connected by glass galleries. Such ideas inspired several architectural projects in the 19th and 20th centuries. The most famous of these is the building of the Crystal Palace in 1851 at Hyde Park. Authors used dome cities in response to many problems, sometimes to the benefit of the people living in them, and sometimes not. The problems of air pollution and other environmental destruction are a common motive, particularly in stories of the middle to late 20th century. In some works, the dome city represents the last stand of the human race. In the 1976 film Logan's Run, the characters have a comfortable life within a dome city, but the city also serves to control the populace and to ensure that humanity never again outgrows its means. And incidentally, that's my favorite kind of science fiction. Dystopian societies disguised as utopian societies. Whether it's only living to 30, having to hunt down replicants, or having your whole society run by apes, there are plenty of stories to choose from. During the 1960s and 70s, the domed city concept was widely discussed outside the confines of science fiction. In 1960, visionary engineer Buckminster Fuller described the dome over Manhattan, a 3-kilometer geodesic dome spanning Midtown Manhattan that would regulate weather and reduce air pollution. Obviously, it never got built, but can you imagine? Anyway, Seward's Success, Alaska, was a dome city proposed in 1968 and designed to hold over 40,000 people, along with commercial, recreational, and office space. Intended to capitalize on the economic boom following the discovery of oil in northern Alaska, the project was canceled in 1972 due to delays in constructing the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. I'm sure there were other reasons as well. In order to test whether an artificial closed ecological system was feasible, Biosphere 2, a complex of interconnected domes and glass pyramids, was constructed in the late 1980s. Its original experiment housed 8 people and remains the largest such system attempted to date. In 2010, a domed city known as EcoCity 2020 was proposed for the Mir mine in Siberia. In 2014, the ruler of Dubai announced plans for a climate-controlled domed city named Mall of the World, covering an area of 48 million square feet. But as of 2016, the project had been redesigned without the dome, which of course was disappointing. Anyway, I ran through my plan with both crews, the Martian scientists, Tom and King Targon, and everyone was hopeful it would work. I would exploit the Sentient Meteor Swarm's weakness, allowing us to gain the advantage. And I will tell you all about it next time. But before I end this evening's story, I want to talk to you about something. As I've said before many times, you have to expect the unexpected when adventuring. But sometimes adventurers may keep that in mind, but forget that unexpected things can happen at the end, too, right when things are wrapping up. It's because we're just so programmed for things to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and when we're at the end, we don't expect the middle to show up again, unannounced. But that can happen during any adventure, so don't be surprised when it does indeed happen. This is when preparation, rationality, a calm demeanor, and occasionally wolfsbane, if you're in Eastern Europe, can all come in extremely handy. So don't be afraid if an adventure goes on a bit longer than you expected it to. Sure, it can be surprising and may interfere with dinner plans, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it will add to the story you'll get to tell afterwards. Why not be the hero for a little longer anyway? So enjoy your journey, even when the length is unexpectedly variable. Good night, adventurers.
The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood was created, written, and performed by Chris Mancini and produced by White Cat Entertainment. It is a work of fiction. Maybe. Music and sound design by Ron Tansky at rontanskymusic.com. For more info and merchandise, including t-shirts, mugs, and blankets, go to whitecatentertainment.com.